love psychology. Of course, when I got my first Kindle, I had to read a psych book, and the book that I chose to read was The Paradox of Choice. This is a relatively older book. I think it came out in 2009, but I feel like it's almost more relevant than it was when it first came out. The book essentially discusses that in modern society, we have a lot more choices than people did in the past, but these choices do come with some drawbacks as well, specifically in the way that we make those decisions, how we feel after we make those decisions, and things like that. After finishing the book, there were 3 quotes that I highlighted that really stood out to me, so I wanted to share these with you guys, just because I feel like part of reading and learning is sharing that information with others as well. The first quote is, "Beauty used to be a gift bestowed upon the few for the rest of us to admire. Today it's an achievement, and holiness is not just a misfortune, but a failure." I have the memory of a chicken, so apologies if I'm remembering this section incorrectly, but I believe in this section he was discussing that there's been an increase in plastic surgery, and because we have so many choices available to us in regards to changing the way we look, if that's plastic surgery, weight loss methods, and so forth, basically the way we look, if we don't look a certain way, that is now seen as a failure because we have options to change the way that we look. This was written in 2009, and I feel like in 2025, especially with the rise of social media, this is even more relevant than it was when it was first written. Pressure to make beauty standards is even more intense than it was before because fillers, Botox, plastic surgery, weight loss methods like stamping and so forth are even more prevalent than they were in the past, and more people use them in today's society. So people are seen as even more of a failure because they don't meet beauty standards, because there's so many different choices nowadays to change the way that you look. The second quote I highlighted was, "Happy people have the ability to distract themselves and move on, whereas unhappy people get stuck ruminating and making themselves more and more miserable." I mostly highlighted this quote for myself because I am someone who will get stuck on something and think about it constantly and make myself feel worse than if I was to just move on. So this quote is more for me. In the book, he differentiated between satisficers and maximizers, and I am 100% a maximizer. Every decision that I make, I feel so horrible afterwards because I always weigh the other options and think about what would have happened if I would have made a different choice, whereas satisficers are people who just make a choice and kind of accept it for what it is for the most part. No person is 100% a satisficer or 100% a maximizer. Everybody is sort of a mix. Like obviously when it goes to picking a body scrub, I'm not going to think about for like 200 days, oh my god, I should have picked a different body scrub. I mean, maybe I would have if it was an expensive body scrub, but in general, I do definitely lead towards the maximizer side. Discovering that I'm definitely on more of the maximizer side made me realize that I really need to change the way that I approach certain things, because having all this regret about decisions is not healthy. And so this book really showed me a lot on how I can work on the way that I make decisions and feel less regret and guilt and sadness about the choices that I didn't make. The last quote I highlighted was about an animal study that was done about learned helplessness, and the quote is, "Having learned this helplessness, the animals then transferred the lesson to the new situation, one in which they actually did have control." Once again, my memory is horrible, so I'll try to remember and summarize this as best as I can, but essentially rats were separated into 2 groups. In one group, if they were to step on a lever, I believe, then the shock that they were receiving would stop, so they kind of had control over what was happening to them. In the other group, regardless of if the rat stepped on the lever or not, they would still receive the shock, so no matter what they did not have control over what was happening to them. These rats were put into a new experiment where I believe they were receiving shocks again, but if they made their way through the maze or whatever, they were able to escape those shocks. But the rats that learned helplessness didn't try to run away or try and get out of the situation. They just stayed there and accepted the shocks because they had learned in a previous experiment that whatever they did, they wouldn't be able to escape these. So even though they had the option now to escape the shocks, they didn't even bother to try because they had learned this helplessness. Similar to the last quote, I highlighted this quote because I felt like it related to me personally. I have been in a lot of situations where I felt like I didn't have control over what was happening to me, and because of that, I feel like I do kind of have learned helplessness, and that is something that I really need to overcome because it really is a barrier to living a good, happy life. Just because you've experienced situations in the past where you did not have control over what happened to you, these are new situations, and in these situations, there's a strong chance that you do have control over what happens to you. But those are all my quotes from The Paradox of Choice. Like I said, this is an older book, but I feel like it is even more relevant today than it was before. It was really interesting to read, and I'm excited to read more books on similar topics.